Hello again. Today we're going to talk about Chapter 12. And we're talking about juveniles here. So what are some of the issues that affect juveniles and whether or not they go into juvenile delinquency, whether they get into petty stuff, or whether they succeed? Because they're all different. And they're all in different demographics or different areas. So it's not a one-size-fits-all, just like community partnerships. It's not a one-size-fits-all. So if you think about the number of juveniles commit crime, it's relatively small, but it does have an impact. All you got to do is look at school shootings. So do you think community policing would help intervene with youth before they get into some kind of delinquent behavior? What does the community partnership give, the community policing partnership give to them when they're out in the community and they meet police officers? Do you think it builds a trust? Does it build a relationship? And does that affect what the juvenile does in the future? I can tell you from personal experience that, not that I was a juvenile delinquent, but that a police officer lived across the street from me. And he was actually a canine officer for a while, but he was also a crime prevention officer. And his kids were friends of mine. And he took me into the office one day and I rode with him in crime prevention. I wasn't old enough to drive. I don't remember what my age was. But that's what sold me on police work, is the way he did it. And he did it building those partnerships. So when you look at kids, you got to think about things like risk factors, protective factors, which, they're different, but which one's winning? Protective factors, is it nurturing family, good friends, or is it bad family environment and not so good friends? What do you think probably would cause some of that? And there's all kinds of ways you can identify activities in kids that are questionable. Doesn't mean they're going to become delinquents, but it's questionable. And, like poor grades, missing school, moving. My wife is a secretary in an elementary school, and she's got kids in that elementary school that move all the time. Every 3 months they're at a different address with a different person. Mother might be in jail. So the grandmother's raising them. And yeah, she's got a large number of underprivileged youth. So does that set the juvenile up for failure? Not necessarily, but he's got to have the right role models to handle. So that's where the teachers really come in. They help a lot for these kids that don't have that kind of environment, a nurturing environment at home. And I think you all would agree that we've had a pretty decent breakdown of the family unit. It started out, I guess, with parents that both worked, and the child was left to their own devices for a while. And now there's, I call it free-range children, raising children, free-range children. They pretty much let them do whatever they want so they can experience what they're doing. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't want them pouring ketchup all over my couch just to see how long it takes it to soak up. But there are things like that. Do you think they're victims of their society or any of those issues? And there are federal agencies, there are federal statistics with 3 demographic background measures and 41 indicators, and they're on the slideshow and they're in the book. You can look at those. We won't go through all of those in video. But there are things out there to tell you something's going on, don't they? How do you assess a juvenile that's in crisis? Is it because they've become introverted when they weren't? Is it because they've got a new set of friends? Is it because something's happened in the family, a dynamic? Here at the college, at the university, I've had people who come in and I notice they're different, and I'll ask them, "Are you okay?" And one of their grandmother might have died, or some family crisis or something like that. And you need to notice those things. So I'll give an extension of time for things like that and make sure that the student's fine. That's the type of environment we want to have here at Mary Baldwin. And for the most part, a lot of the kids here do. The students do. But there are always those few that really don't have a family unit that's a family support unit. You've got all these other different things that police can use to build relationships with children. you know how important building partnerships are. You know how I feel about it. That policing is not going to be effective without a partnership with the community. It just won't work. Because if you don't have it, you're nothing but an occupying army, and that's not what we're supposed to be. So how can we take that where we're working with the whole neighborhood, and how we're going to bring the kids into that? There's all kinds of different things you can do, but how do you think we could bring the kids into that community policing initiative where they're actually part of it? Because what's going to happen with them? They're going to get to know you, and then that's going to make an impression on what happens to them. Even if they have a bad police officer experience the first time they get pulled over or something of that nature, which one of my students did the other day, they still have a respect, and they realize that that's just one person that's acting out, not everybody else. Houston has a thing. You'll find that all big cities have some kind of program towards kids. It's easier to do in smaller communities because even though there are less police officers, there's less calls for service. Some places have calls for service that are absolutely ridiculous. Harris County, Texas do. And they have so many calls running back and forth, it might be a while before they can get to you on a 911 call. And it talks about the Adam Walsh Safety Act and things like that. And I actually met him at a conference or a foundation luncheon in Charlotte. And his whole underlining thing is that he just doesn't want this to happen to another child. So wealthy in his own right, that's how he's produced his show. So you get people in the community, especially people that've got the money to help, and they put these things together. And what about Big Brothers and Sisters, American Promise Alliance, teaching people about how to be safe with their children? I went to the National Center for Child, I can't remember what it's called. The Center for Child Protection in Washington, and I was there for a 2-day course. And they talked about, they had a mother actually come in and talk about it. We thought she was just a speaker, but found out she's a victim of having her child snatched and never recovered. She came in and she's talking about how they went to a ball game in a rural community, and there was trees between the street and the ball field, and there was only one way in, and her child was in there, and she went to get Coke or something like that. She wasn't gone more than 2 minutes, and he was gone. So, how do you keep track of your kids if you're out there? Teach some of those things. We all know that we should look before we cross the street. You walk out a door, be cognizant of what's around you. Look both directions. Don't walk down the sidewalk with headphones on or earbuds where you can't hear because you got the music up so loud, because it's easy for somebody to sneak up behind you. And you talk to the kids about these things as they grow up. It helps a lot. Got all kinds of family counseling. There's counseling out there for kids that are ADD, ADHD, you name it, there's a counselor out there for it. And they can be a great help if you have a child you think sliding the other way. I know that raising an ADD or an ADHD child is different than raising one that doesn't have it. And so you've got to learn how to work with that child and make sure they're successful, because it is a difference. For one thing, you don't give them multiple instructions at one time and expect them to carry it out, because it isn't going to happen. Do you think that schools are basically parenting most of the children these days? It'd be interesting. I know by the demographics that go to my wife's school, maybe 40% of the school are the ones that they parent. And even with grandmothers, they're usually very good with the kids, but it's harder to hold them. You'll hold on to them and keep them restrained the older you get. They kind of wear you down. There's other programs like it describes in the book, Project Safe Childhood, Safe Start Initiative, school resource officers. All those programs help keep the family, or keep the police and the youth engaged. In Waynesboro, we had a police basketball game. Several of the police officers played basketball, so they would go to a youth basketball game or practice at the YMCA, and they would interact with the kids. They loved it. They absolutely loved it. Because they're pretty good, and they're going to make baskets that the officers can't make, and that just makes them feel really proud. And also builds that personal relationship that is so, so important. important. I know I'm getting long-winded. I'm just trying to go through this. But think about the importance of schools. We talk about school resource officer, other things that are in school, how they can reduce things, school vandalism and break-ins. You've got to deal with that when it comes up. Bullying in school, big issue. How are you going to do that? I can tell you right now that most of the schools, at least in Virginia, it's extremely difficult to suspend a child. So what are we teaching the youth? Are we teaching them that there is absolutely no consequence of your action? That's my opinion. I'm not saying you should go beat them in the paddle at the football coach's office, but they need to know that there's consequences to what they do. School shootings. If you do any research on the shootings, whether they're with semi-automatic assault rifles or whatever, 70% of the shootings, deaths by firearm, are caused by people with mental issues. And Florida would look at that. That boy had some mental issues. He had red flags everywhere, and nobody caught up on him, or they ignored it. They ignored them. So that's important to look for those types of things. Maybe if we spend a little bit more money on mental health issues, maybe we could get to the bottom of this. But that brings up another question. Why do we have those problems in mental health now? I don't necessarily know. You know, put some parameters on the child. Don't do this, don't do that type of thing. They're always good. But I'd like you to tell me what you think are some of the programs that would work to kind of guide children to the right track and keep them from becoming juvenile delinquents, and where that help could come from. Is it from the same source or multiple sources? Thanks. Take care.